At Christmas dinner, I was told to sit in the kitchen. I didn't argue, I didn't ask why. I just smiled and carried the tray of roasted turkey past the dining table where everyone else was already seated. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end and tell me where you're watching from, because I need someone out there to understand what this felt like. Christmas had always been my favorite time of year. For 42 years, I was the one who hosted it. Not just the cooking, anyone can follow a recipe, but the feeling of it. The warmth, the tradition, the quiet certainty that for one night, everything in the family felt right. I used to wake up before sunrise on Christmas morning. Even now, at 68, my body still does it out of habit. That morning, I stood in my kitchen at 5:30 a.m., the house still dark, the world outside silent under a thin layer of snow. I turned on a small lamp above the stove. The same one my husband, Richard, had installed 20 years ago because he said the overhead light was too harsh for early mornings. I could almost hear his voice. "Take it slow, Claire," he used to say. "It's Christmas. No need to rush." But that morning, I did rush, because this was the first Christmas since he passed, and I needed it to be perfect. I basted the turkey every 30 minutes, prepared the cranberry sauce from scratch, the way my son used to love when he was a boy, mashed the potatoes until they were smooth enough to melt, set the dining table with my best china, the white set with gold trim we had saved for over a year to buy. 8 place settings. 1 for me, .1 for my son, Daniel .1 for his wife, Laura, and 4 for the grandchildren who had grown too fast for my liking. I even polished the silverware myself, though my hands aren't as steady as they used to be, because I thought maybe this year would bring us closer again. Maybe grief would remind us what mattered. By late afternoon, the house smelled exactly the way it used to when Richard was alive. Warm, rich, full of something deeper than just food. For a moment, standing there in the kitchen, I allowed myself to believe nothing had changed. That illusion lasted until the doorbell rang. Daniel walked in first. Carrying a bottle of wine, I knew he hadn't picked himself. He barely looked at me when he said, "Hey, Mom." Just, "Hey, Mom." No hug, no pause, no words. Laura followed behind him, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like a metronome, keeping time for something cold and distant. She gave me a quick smile, the kind people use with neighbors, not family. The children rushed past me without stopping, already talking about their new gifts, their new gadgets, their new lives that somehow didn't seem to include me anymore. I told myself not to notice. I told myself it was just the way things are now. We moved toward the dining room together, the same way we always had. I carried the turkey carefully, both hands steady despite the heat and weight. And that's when it happened. Laura glanced at the table, then at me. Then she said, casually, as if she were suggesting something minor, something practical, "Oh, Claire, why don't you just sit in the kitchen tonight? It'll be more comfortable. The kids need the space." Just like that. No hesitation, no apology, no awareness of what those words meant. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. I looked at Daniel. He didn't look back. He was already pulling out a chair, sitting down, pouring himself a drink, as if this had already been decided, as if I had already agreed. The room didn't go silent. That's the thing people don't tell you. Moments like that don't come with dramatic pauses or shocked gasps. They happen quietly, buried under the clink of glasses and the rustle of napkins. Invisible, unless you're the one being erased. I felt something shift inside me. Not break. Not yet. Just move. Like a piece of furniture being quietly pushed out of place. And then I smiled. "Of course," I said. My voice didn't shake. I made sure of that. Because after everything I had given to this family, I would not beg for a seat at my own table. I turned, picked up the gravy boat, adjusted the tray in my hands, and walked back into the kitchen. Behind me, I could hear them laughing. The kitchen felt smaller than I remembered. It always had, really, but that night it felt reduced, like it had been reassigned a purpose I never agreed to. I set the tray down on the counter and stood there for a moment, my hands still wrapped around the edges of the metal, as if I hadn't quite received the signal to let go. From the dining room, I could hear everything. Laughter, glasses clinking, the soft scrape of chairs against hardwood floors. Life continuing without me. I told myself it was temporary, just a practical adjustment. Too many people. Not enough space. That's what she said, after all. It'll be more comfortable. I glanced around the kitchen. The narrow table by the window had one chair. Mine, apparently. No place setting that in folded napkin that in glass. Just a bare surface and a faint reflection of the overhead light. I pulled the chair out slowly and sat down. For a moment, I considered getting back up, walking into the dining room, saying something, anything, but the thought passed as quickly as it came, because I already knew what would happen. They would look at me, surprised, uncomfortable, and then Laura would smile that same tight, polite smile and say something like, "Oh, Claire, we just thought this would be easier for everyone." Easier. Such a gentle word for something so final. So I stayed where I was. I reached for the edge of the table and ran my fingers along the wood. It was worn in places, softened by years of use. I remembered when Daniel was 10, sitting right there doing his homework while I cooked dinner. He used to swing his legs under the chair, tapping them against the cabinet doors until I told him to stop. "Mom," he would say, grinning, "you love the noise." And maybe I did, because it meant he was still close. I swallowed and stood up again. Old habits are hard to break. I filled a plate for myself. Turkey, potatoes, a spoonful of stuffing. I even added cranberry sauce, though suddenly it didn't taste the way it used to. As I carried the plate back to the table, I paused by the doorway that led to the dining room. Just for a second, just long enough to see them. Daniel sat at the head of the table. My seat. He leaned back in the chair like he belonged there, one arm draped over the side, a glass of wine in his hand. Laura sat to his right, laughing at something one of the children had said. No one looked toward the kitchen. Not once. I stepped back before anyone could notice me standing there. Not that they would have. I returned to my chair and sat down, placing the plate in front of me with care. The first bite tasted like nothing. Not bad, not good, just empty. I chewed slowly, mechanically, listening to the rhythm of a dinner I'd spent all day preparing. At some point, one of the grandchildren came into the kitchen. Emma, the youngest. She couldn't have been more than 8. She stopped when she saw me. "Grandma," she said softly. I looked up and smiled. "There you are, sweetheart." She glanced back toward the dining room, then at me again. "Why are you eating in here?" Children have a way of asking questions adults avoid. I kept my voice light. "Oh, I just want a little quiet, that's all." She frowned, clearly not convinced. "But there's room at the table." I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it again. Because what could I say? That there was space, just not for me. Before I could respond, Laura's voice cut through from the other room. "Emma, honey, come back. Don't bother your grandmother while she's resting." Resting? I almost smiled at that. Emma hesitated for a moment longer, then gave me a small wave before running back to the dining room. The moment she disappeared, the noise swallowed her up again. And just like that, I was alone. I finished my meal in silence, washed my plate, dried it, put it back in a cabinet exactly where it belonged. Every movement deliberate, controlled, because if I slowed down, if I allowed myself to feel what was sitting just beneath the surface, I wasn't sure I'd be able to stop it. When I finally turned off the kitchen light and leaned against the counter, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That's when I noticed something. Small, easy to miss. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. On the edge of the counter, near the stack of unopened mail, was a folder. Dark blue, crisp, recently placed. I didn't remember seeing it that morning. And I knew every inch of this kitchen. I stepped closer, slowly, carefully, as if the folder itself might react to sudden movement. There was no name on the outside, no label, just a faint crease where it had been opened and closed again. I reached out, paused, then pulled my hand back. Not yet. Something told me this wasn't just a misplaced document. Something told me this was the beginning of an answer I hadn't realized I was searching for. And for the first time that night, I stopped feeling invisible. Because invisible people don't get secrets hidden from them. I didn't open the folder that night. Not because I wasn't curious, but because at my age, you learn something important about unpleasant truths. They don't disappear just because you wait, but once you uncover them, there's no going back to not knowing. So I left it there, right where it was, and I went to bed. The house felt different. It had for months, maybe longer. But that night, it was impossible to ignore. The walls didn't echo the same way. The floors didn't creak with familiarity. Even the air felt borrowed. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my hands folded over the blanket the way Richard used to sleep. It still smelled faintly like the lavender detergent I'd used for years, but beneath that, something else had crept in. Something colder. Down the hall, I could hear movement. Daniel and Laura hadn't gone to bed yet. Their voices were low, careful, controlled. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized the tone. It was the kind of tone people use when they don't want to be overheard. I turned my head slightly toward the door. The instinct was automatic. For years, I had been the center of this house. Every conversation, every decision, every plan flowed through me in one way or another. Now, I was outside of it, listening through walls in a home that still had my name on the deed. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not out of habit this time, out of awareness. The kind that settles into your bones when something isn't right. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. I slipped out of bed, pulled on my robe, and walked down the hallway slowly, each step deliberate against the wooden floor. The kitchen light was already on. Laura, she stood by the counter, her back to me, her phone pressed to her ear. "I told you," she whispered, her voice tight. "We need to move faster." She's still here. I stopped, right there in the doorway. Every instinct told me to step back, to make noise, to let her know I was there. But I didn't. I stayed still. Invisible again, but this time by choice. "She doesn't suspect anything yet," Laura continued. "Daniel thinks we should wait, but I don't want to risk it." A pause, then a quiet laugh. Short, sharp. "No, the paperwork's almost ready. We just need her signature." My heart didn't race. That surprised me. It should have. But instead, it slowed. Each beat heavier than the last. Grounded. Clear. Because suddenly, everything that had felt vague began to take shape. Signature. Paperwork. Move faster. I stepped back before she could turn around. Silently. Carefully. The same way I used to check on Daniel when he was a child, making sure not to wake him. Except now, I was the one being watched. By the time Laura ended the call and turned around, I was already in the living room, sitting in my usual chair, hands folded neatly in my lap, exactly where she expected me to be. She smiled when she saw me. Bright, pleasant, polished. "Good morning, Claire," she said. "Did you sleep well?" I returned the smile. Perfectly. And for the first time, that wasn't entirely a lie, because clarity brings a strange kind of peace. Daniel came down a few minutes later, adjusting his watch, already dressed as if he had somewhere important to be. He paused when he saw me, just for a second, then continued walking. "Morning, Mom." Still no hug. Still no eye contact. But now I wasn't wondering why. Now I was watching, studying, noticing things I had ignored before. The way Laura answered questions for him. The way he deferred to her without realizing it. The way they exchanged quick glances when they thought I wasn't looking. A silent language. One I had not been invited to understand. Until now. After breakfast, they both left. Quickly. Too quickly. Laura grabbed her purse, Daniel's keys. "We've got some errands to run," she said lightly. "Don't wait up. Don't wait up." "In my own house." I nodded. Of course I did. And I watched them walk out the front door together. Listen to the engine start. The car pull away. And only when the sound had completely disappeared did I stand up, slowly, deliberately, and walk back into the kitchen. The folder was still there, exactly where I had left it, waiting. I placed my hand on it this time. No hesitation, no second thoughts, because whatever they were planning, whatever they thought they could take from me, it was time I stopped being the last person to know. I opened it, and the first line I saw made everything perfectly clear. The paper didn't shake in my hands. That surprised me. I thought it would. After everything I had just overheard, after everything I was beginning to understand, I expected my fingers to tremble, my vision to blur, my breath to catch somewhere in my chest. But none of that happened. Instead, I stood there in the kitchen, completely still, holding the document like it was just another piece of mail. Just another bill, just another notice, just another ordinary thing. Except it wasn't. Property transfer authorization. The word sat at the top of the page in clean, formal print. Below that, my name, Claire Henderson, followed by a paragraph of legal language that, to anyone else, might have seemed routine. But I'd spent enough years beside Richard to recognize what I was looking at. Because my husband never made a decision without explaining it to me first. Every document, every contract, every investment, he would sit at this very kitchen table, spread the papers out, and say, "Claire, if anything ever happens to me, I want you to understand everything. Not just trust it." And I had listened. I had learned. Not because I ever thought I would need to use that knowledge, but because he believed I should. I pulled out a chair and sat down slowly, the paper still in my hands. The words blurred together for a moment, not from tears, but from memory, because suddenly I wasn't in that kitchen anymore. I was 25 again, standing in a small apartment with peeling wallpaper, watching Richard unpack our first set of dishes, mismatched secondhand, but ours. "You see this?" he had said, holding up a chipped plate like it was something valuable. "This is just the beginning." And it had been. We built everything from that beginning. Every dollar saved, every room furnished, every Christmas hosted. Together. I looked down at the document again. The language was clear now. Painfully clear. This wasn't just paperwork. This was a transfer. Ownership. Control. Everything that had Richard's name on it. Everything that had become mine after he passed would be reassigned to Daniel, with Laura listed as secondary authority, effective immediately upon signature. I let out a slow breath. Still no tears. Still no panic. Just understanding. Because suddenly, every moment from the night before made sense. The chair at the table, or rather, the lack of one. The way Daniel sat at the head without hesitation. The way Laura spoke as if decisions had already been made. They weren't testing boundaries. They were enforcing a new reality. One where I no longer belonged in this house. Because in their minds, it was already theirs. I placed the paper flat on the table. Smoothed it out with my palm. Carefully. Deliberately. The same way I used to smooth out Daniel's school papers when he was a boy, making sure they weren't wrinkled before he turned them in. I used to tell him, if you present something, make it neat. Make it clear. People respect that. I wondered if he remembered. My eyes moved to the bottom of the page. The signature line. Blank. Waiting. A memory surfaced then. Not soft. Not gentle. Sharp. Clear. It was 3 months before Richard passed. We were sitting in the living room, the late afternoon sun coming through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. He looked tired, thinner than he used to be, but his voice was steady. "Claire," he said, "promise me something." I remember laughing lightly. "You always say that like I have a choice." He smiled. "You don't, but I still want to hear you say it." I reached for his hand. "All right, what is it?" His grip tightened slightly. "If anyone ever tries to make you feel like you don't belong in your own home," he paused, just for a second, then finished, "you don't leave. You understand? This house is yours, not because of paperwork, but because you built it." I blinked. The kitchen came back into focus. The paper still in front of me. The silence heavier now. Not empty. Not hollow. Heavy. Grounded. They need her signature. Laura's voice echoed in my mind. They need to move faster. I looked at the pen sitting beside the folder. Black ink. Uncapped. Ready. And for the first time since Christmas dinner, I felt something shift. Not confusion. Not sadness. Something else. Something colder. Something clearer. They thought I was still the woman who would sit quietly in the kitchen, smile politely, sign whatever was placed in front of me, and thank them for including me at all. I picked up the pen, turned it slowly between my fingers, and set back down, exactly where it had been. "No," I said softly, "not to them, not yet, just to myself." Because the truth was, I had spent my entire life building this family, holding it together, making space for everyone else. But now, it was time to see who had been quietly removing me from it. I didn't sign the paper. I left it exactly where it was, closed the folder, turned off the kitchen light, and went about my day as if nothing had changed. Because sometimes the most powerful move isn't action. It's silence. They came home, around 3 p.m. I heard the car before I saw them. The same low hum of the engine pulling into the driveway. The same slam of the car door. The same footsteps on the porch. Everything familiar. Except now, I was listening differently. I was no longer part of the rhythm. I was observing it. Laura walked in first, her voice bright, almost rehearsed. "Claire, we're back." I looked up from the couch and smiled. "Welcome home." Daniel followed behind her, loosening his tie, already halfway distracted. He gave me a quick nod before heading straight to the kitchen. To the folder. Of course. I didn't turn my head, but I listened. The faint sound of paper shifting without a pause. Then Laura's voice, lower now. "She hasn't touched it." "Daniel, maybe she didn't see it." "Laura, it was right there." Another pause. Then quieter. "We don't have time to wait forever." I picked up my teacup and took a slow sip. Chamomile. Warm. Calm. Steady. The exact opposite of what they were feeling right now. A few minutes later, Laura stepped into the living room. Her smile returned instantly. Effortless. Polished. "Claire," she said gently, "we were thinking maybe we could sit down later and go over some paperwork together." There it was. The invitation. Soft. Friendly. Harmless on the surface. But now I knew what lived underneath it. I tilted my head slightly. "Paperwork? Oh, just some routine things," she said quickly. Making sure everything is organized. In case of anything. In case of anything. I almost admired the phrasing. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Sharp. Unexpected. Real. Laura's expression flickered. Just for a second. Then she turned toward the door. "I'll get it." I set my cup down carefully and listened. The door opened. A voice. Male. Calm. Familiar in a distant way. "Good afternoon. I'm looking for Mrs. Claire Henderson." Laura hesitated. "She's busy right now. Can I help you?" "I'm afraid I need to speak with her directly." There was something in his tone. Not aggressive. Not rude. But firm enough that it couldn't be brushed aside. I stood up, slowly, and walked toward the hallway. "It's all right," I said, my voice steady. "I'm right here." Laura stepped aside reluctantly. And that's when I saw him. Mid-60s. Gray suit. Leather briefcase. The kind of man who carried information carefully and delivered it even more carefully. He gave me a small, respectful nod. "Mrs. Henderson." "Yes. My name is Thomas Green. I was your husband's attorney." The world didn't stop, but something inside me aligned. Because I remembered that name. Richard had mentioned him before. Not often, but enough. "I didn't expect you," I said. "I apologize for arriving unannounced," he replied. "But after reviewing some recent activity tied to your property, I felt it would be best to speak with you in person." Behind me, I could feel Laura's presence. Still, alert, listening. "Recent activity?" I asked. Mr. Green glanced briefly past me, just enough to acknowledge the room behind me, then returned his attention to me. "Yes," he said carefully. "There have been preliminary filings initiated regarding a transfer of ownership." I nodded once. "I've seen the paperwork." His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "Have you signed it?" No, a pause. Then quietly, "Good." Silence settled in the hallway. Thick, heavy, charged with something Laura could no longer control. Mr. Green opened his briefcase and removed a document. Different from the one in the kitchen. Older, worn at the edges. "But that's not why I'm here," he said. "I'm here because your husband left specific instructions to be followed only if certain conditions were met." My fingers curled slightly at my sides. "What kind of conditions?" He met my eyes directly. Clear, steady, certain. "The moment someone attempts to remove you from your own home or pressure you into signing away your rights." Behind me, I heard Laura inhale sharply. And just like that, the game changed. No one spoke. Not immediately. The air in the hallway felt different now. No longer heavy with silence, but charged with something sharper. Awareness. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could feel Laura behind me. Rigid. Calculating. Trying to recover. "Mr. Green," she said finally, her voice smoother now, carefully controlled. "I think there must be some misunderstanding. We were only trying to help Claire organize things." He didn't even look at her. "I wasn't speaking to you." It wasn't rude. It wasn't loud. But it was final. For the first time since she walked into my house, Laura had nothing to say. I gestured slightly toward the living room. Please, I said. Come in. Mr. Green stepped inside, placing his briefcase neatly on the coffee table before sitting down. I took my seat across from him. Calm, composed, exactly the way Richard had taught me to handle conversations that mattered. Daniel hovered near the doorway, uncertain, like a man who had just realized he had walked into a conversation he didn't understand. Mom, what is this? He asked. I looked at him, really looked this time, not as the boy I raised, but as the man standing in front of me. This, I said quietly, is something your father prepared long before any of this. Mr. Green opened the document. The paper made a soft sound as it unfolded, louder than it should have been in a room this tense. Your husband, he began, addressing me directly, was very clear about one thing. He paused, not for effect, but for precision. He did not believe in blind trust. I almost smiled. That sounded exactly like Richard. He understood, Mr. Green continued, that circumstances can change. People can change. And sometimes intentions are not what they appear to be. Laura shifted behind me. I heard it. The subtle movement of someone trying to remain invisible after realizing they no longer are. Because of that, he said, he created a protective clause within his estate plan. My fingers rested lightly against my knee. Still steady. Still controlled. What kind of clause? I asked. He slid the document across the table toward me. This one. I looked down. The heading was simple, but unmistakable. Irrevocable retention of primary residence ownership. The words settled into place immediately. Not confusing, not complex. Clear, absolute. This clause, Mr. Green explained, ensures that the property remains entirely under your control. It cannot be transferred, reassigned, or restructured without your voluntary and informed consent. I nodded slowly. And if someone tries, he didn't hesitate, then any individual involved in that attempt is automatically removed from any future inheritance connected to the estate. Behind me, silence. Not the quiet kind, the kind that follows impact. I lifted my gaze, met Daniel's eyes. For the first time since Christmas dinner, he didn't look away. What does that mean? He asked. His voice was different now, less certain, less distant. Mr. Green answered him directly. It means, he said calmly, that if you or your wife attempt to pressure your mother into signing over this house, a pause, measured, precise, you will receive nothing. The word hung there. Nothing. Laura stepped forward then. Finally, this is ridiculous, she said, her voice tightening. We're her family. We're trying to take care of her. I raised my hand. Not sharply, not dramatically, just enough. And she stopped. That was new. Laura, I said softly, I think it's time we stop pretending. Her lips pressed together, but she didn't speak. I turned back to Mr. Green. Is there anything else? I asked. He studied me for a moment, noticing something, recognizing it. Yes, he said. There is one more thing. He reached into his briefcase again, pulled out a second document, placed it beside the first. This, he said, was to be delivered only if the clause was activated. I looked down, at the paper, at my name, at Richard's signature at the bottom, and for the first time, I felt it. Not anger, not grief, power. I rested my hand gently on the document. Didn't open it yet. Didn't need to, because whatever was inside, I already knew one thing. I was no longer the woman sitting in the kitchen. No one moved. Not me, not Daniel, not Laura. Even the air in the room felt like it had decided to wait. I looked down at the second document. Richard's signature sat at the bottom, firm, steady, unmistakable. The same signature I had watched him write on countless Christmas cards, checks, birthday notes. Always the same. Confident. Certain. I opened it. Slowly. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted them to feel every second of it. The paper unfolded with a soft sound, and as my eyes moved across the lines, I understood why he had kept this hidden. This addendum, Mr. Green said quietly, grants you full discretionary authority over all remaining assets should the protective clause be triggered. I didn't look up. Meaning, he answered carefully, meaning you're no longer obligated to distribute anything to anyone. Silence. Again. But this time, it didn't belong to them. I lifted my gaze. Met Daniel's eyes. Really met them. And for the first time since he walked into this house, I saw it. Not indifference. Not distance. Confusion. What does that mean? He asked again. But this time softer. Less certain. I folded the paper gently. Placed it back on the table. It means, I said calmly, your father made sure I would never have to choose between being respected and being generous. Laura allowed a short breath. Almost a laugh. But there was no humor in it. This is insane, she said. You're turning this into something it's not. We were just trying to help. I repeated. Not loud. Not sharp. But enough to stop her. I stood up. Slowly. The movement drew their attention in a way words no longer needed to. Help, I said again, walking past her toward the kitchen. Is that what you call it? I reached the counter. Picked up the folder. Held it up. You left this here, I continued. On purpose. Laura's jaw tightened. Daniel looked between us. Mom, we were going to talk to you about it. No, I said. And this time, there was no softness in it. You were going to wait until I trusted you enough to sign it. Daniel froze. Not because of what I said, but because of how easily it fit. I placed the folder back down. Carefully. Deliberately. I heard you this morning, I added. That did it. Laura's composure cracked. Just slightly. But enough. What are you talking about? She asked quickly. I looked at her. Not with anger. Not with accusation. With certainty. We need to move faster, I said quietly. She's still here. Daniel turned to her. Slowly. Laura. She didn't answer right away. And in that silence, everything shifted. Because doubt doesn't need proof. It just needs a crack. It's not what you think, she said finally. Too fast. Too sharp. I tilted my head slightly. Then what is it? Another pause. Longer this time. Daniel stepped back. Just half a step. But I saw it. Distance. I was just talking about paperwork timelines, Laura said, her voice tightening. That's all. You're twisting this, am I? I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. Because now, he was listening. Daniel looked at me. Then at her. Then back at me again. Mom, he said slowly. Why would you think we'd try to take the house from you? There it was. The question he should have asked before. I held his gaze. Steady. Unflinching. I said. Not at first. A beat. But you didn't give me a seat at my own table, Daniel. The words landed harder than anything else I'd said. Last night, I continued, you sat in my chair in my home, while your wife told me to eat in the kitchen. His face changed. Not dramatically, but enough. Recognition. Because for the first time, he saw it the way I had lived it. I thought, he started, then stopped. Exactly. You didn't think, I said gently. And that hurt him more than anger ever could. Laura stepped in again. Tried to regain control. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You're making him feel guilty over nothing. No, I said quietly. I turned to her. Fully now. I'm letting him see what he chose not to. And just like that, she had no place left to stand. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Frustrated. Conflicted. Laura, why didn't you tell me about the clause, he asked. Her silence answered for her. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about control anymore. This was about truth. Daniel didn't say anything after that. He just stood there, still, processing. And I let him, because some realizations you can't force. You can only create the silence for them to arrive. I walked back to my chair, sat down, folded my hands in my lap, the same way I had done the night before. But this time, I wasn't invisible. Do you remember last Christmas? I asked quietly. Daniel blinked, caught off guard. What? Last Christmas, I repeated. When you said you were keeping it small. Just the kids. He frowned slightly. Yeah. You said you were tired. You didn't want to come. I nodded once. Slow. Measured. That's what Laura told you. He turned to her. Slowly. Again. Is that true? He asked. Laura crossed her arms. Defensive now. I didn't lie. She said she didn't want to be a burden. I said I didn't want to trouble you. I corrected gently. A pause. Those aren't the same thing. Daniel's expression shifted again. Subtle, but deeper this time. Memory. I waited that night. I continued. Dinner was ready at 6. I kept the food warm until almost 9. I didn't look at him. Didn't need to. I even set a place for you. Silence. Because now, he was remembering. And your birthday, I added softly. 2 years ago. He exhaled slowly. That was different. Laura planned that trip months in advance. Yes, I said. She did. I looked up, met his eyes, and she made sure I found out after you had already left. Laura stepped forward again. Okay, this is getting out of hand. No, Daniel said. Quiet, but firm. And that was new. Let her finish, he added. Laura stared at him, stunned, because for the first time, he wasn't standing beside her. He was listening to me. I let the moment settle, then continued. Emma's first day of school, I said. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, just for a second. She told me it started at 7 a.m. I continued. I got there at 7:15. I paused. The teacher told me Emma had arrived at 8:30. Laura didn't speak this time, because there was nothing left to twist. Each memory landed, one by one. Not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. I thought it was coincidence, I said. For a long time, I folded my hands tighter. I thought maybe I was forgetting things. Misunderstanding. Getting older. That word hung in the air. Older. Because that's how it starts. Not with cruelty, but with doubt. You start questioning yourself, I continued. Not them. Daniel looked at me differently now. Not as his mother. As someone he didn't fully know anymore. Why didn't you say anything? He asked quietly. I almost smiled. Because every time I tried, I said, there was always a reason. I glanced at Laura. A better explanation. Silence. Heavy now, but not confusing anymore. Clear. I kept telling myself. I went on, that family doesn't do things like this on purpose. A beat. But patterns, I said softly, are harder to ignore than excuses. Daniel ran a hand over his face. Slowly. Laura, he said. Just her name. But it carried everything. She straightened. Still trying. Still calculating. You're really going to believe this? She asked. All of this? Over a few misunderstandings. Daniel didn't answer right away. Because now, he wasn't reacting. He was thinking. And that was something she couldn't control. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Watched them. For years, I had been the one try to hold things together. Fix misunderstandings. Smooth over tension. Protect everyone from discomfort. But now, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. There was never anything to fix. Because it wasn't broken. It was built this way. And Laura was standing right at the center of it. Daniel didn't move. Not right away. He just stood there, looking at Laura like he was seeing her from a distance, as if the version of her in front of him didn't quite match the one he thought he knew. Laura, he said slowly, just tell me the truth. Her jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought she might try to soften it again. Redirect. Reframe. That had always been her strength. But something had shifted too far now. The room had turned against her. There's no truth, like she's making it sound. Laura snapped. This is all just her interpretation. The paperwork, Daniel cut in. She stopped. The call this morning, he continued. Why didn't you tell me about any of that? Silence. And then, for the first time since I had known her, Laura didn't try to hide it. She exhaled sharply. Drop the smile. Drop the tone. Drop the act. Because you would have hesitated, she said flatly. Daniel blinked. What? She stepped forward. No longer careful. No longer subtle. You always hesitate, she said. That's your problem. You overthink everything. You get emotional. Each word landed harder than the last. So yes, she continued. I handled it. The room went still. You handled it, Daniel repeated. Yes, she said. Because someone had to. She turned slightly, gesturing around the house. This place, she said, is too much for her. Not you. Her. She can't manage it, Laura went on. She shouldn't be alone here. It's impractical. I didn't react. Because now, I could finally hear her clearly. So the plan was what? Daniel asked. You get her to sign something without telling me? I was going to tell you, she shot back. After. A pause. After, he repeated. She rolled her eyes. Yes, after. Once it was done. Once everything was secure. Then you wouldn't have to stress about it. Stress. As if deception was a form of protection. Daniel let out a slow breath. And the clause? He asked. You knew about that? Another pause. Shorter. Tighter. Yes, she admitted. That word. Changed everything. You knew, he said. Not a question. And you still try to push this through? Laura crossed her arms. Defensive again. But this time, it didn't hold. It was just a precaution, she said. People put things like that in documents all the time. It doesn't mean anything unless someone makes it a problem. I almost smiled. Unless someone makes it a problem. That's not how this works, Daniel said quietly. And there it was. Clarity. Because now, he wasn't confused anymore. He understood. You were going to risk everything, he continued. Everything Dad left us just to get control of the house faster? Laura's expression hardened. Not everything, she said. A beat. Just the part that matters. Silence. Heavy. Final. Because in that moment, she said the one thing she couldn't take back. And Daniel heard it. Not as her husband, but as someone standing outside the illusion. You mean the house, he said. Yes, she replied. No hosetashchen. No epaligi. Because it's valuable, she added. And we need to think about our future. Not just preserve hers. I closed my eyes for a brief second. Not from pain. From confirmation. Because everything I had felt, every doubt, every quiet moment that didn't sit right, had just been given a voice. Out loud, Daniel stepped back. A full step this time. Distance. Real distance. I can't believe this, he said. Laura scoffed. Oh, please. Don't act like you didn't want this too. I didn't want to trick her, he said. Another silence. Because that was the line. And she had crossed it alone. I opened my eyes. Looked at both of them. For years, I had tried to keep this family intact. To protect it. To believe in it. But now, standing in my own living room, watching the truth unfold without my help, I realized something simple. I didn't need to expose anything. They were doing it themselves. No one spoke after that. Not Daniel. Not Laura. Not even Mr. Green. And for the first time that day, the silence belonged to me. I stood up, slowly, not because I needed time, but because I wanted them to watch. Every movement, every step, every shift. I walked to the coffee table, picked up the second document Richard had left behind, held it in my hands. Then I looked at Daniel. You asked me why I didn't say anything before, I said. He nodded. Barely. This is why. I placed the document back down. Flat. Centered. Clear. Because I needed to understand, I continued, whether this was confusion or intention. A pause. Now I know. Laura scoffed again, but sounded weaker this time. Forced. You're overreacting, she said. Nothing even happened. She didn't sign anything, no, I said. And this time, I didn't lower my voice. But you planned for it to happen. She opened her mouth, closed it again, because there was nothing left to reshape. I turned to Mr. Green. What are my options? I asked. Simple question. Clear tone. He didn't hesitate. Given the clause has been activated, he said, you have full authority to restructure your estate as you see fit. I nodded. And if I choose not to include them? Another pause. Then they are excluded, he replied. Just like that. No drama. No negociation. Just consequence. Behind me, I heard Daniel shift. Mom, he said. Soft. Careful. I didn't know. I looked at him. And for the first time in this entire conversation, I believed him. That's true, I said. Laura turned sharply. What do you mean that's true? She snapped. He's part of this family. Yes, I said. I turned to her. He is. Then back to Daniel. But being part of a family, I continued, doesn't mean you get to ignore what's happening inside it. He swallowed. Didn't argue. Because he couldn't. I took a slow breath. For years, I said, I told myself that if I stayed quiet, things would settle. I glanced at Laura. That kindness would be enough. A beat. But kindness without boundaries, I let the sentence hang, is just permission. Silence. Heavy again. But different. Not confusion. Not tension. Finality. I reached for the folder on the kitchen counter. Walked back. Placed it beside the other documents. This, I said, tapping it lightly, is what you wanted me to sign. Then I slid it slightly forward. Go ahead, I added. Read it out loud. Laura hesitated. Daniel didn't. He stepped forward, picked up the paper, and as his eyes moved across the lines, his expression changed. Slowly. Mom, he said under his breath. Because now, he wasn't hearing it from me. He was seeing it himself. The transfer. The control. The complete removal of my authority. All of this, he said quietly. This was already filled out. Yes, I said. He looked up. She just needed my signature. Silence. Daniel lowered the paper. Turned to Laura. You were going to do this without telling me. Not a question. A realization. Laura didn't answer. Because now, she understood something too. This wasn't a conversation anymore. This was a conclusion. I picked up Richard's document again. Held it. Steady. For 42 years. I said, I built this life with your father. I looked at Daniel. And I will not spend what's left of it asking for permission to stay in it. No anger. No tears. Just truth. I turned to Mr. Green. I'd like to proceed, I said. He nodded once. Of course. Behind me, I heard Laura inhale sharply. Proceed with what? She asked. I didn't look at her, because she already knew. Proceed with what? Laura's voice cut through the room. Sharp. Tense. For the first time. Uncertain. I didn't answer her immediately. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I understood something now that I hadn't before. Silence can be louder than any explanation. I turned to Mr. Green. Calm. Steady. I'd like to update the estate, I said. Daniel froze. Laura stepped forward. No, she said quickly. No, you don't need to rush into anything. We can talk about this. I raised my hand. Again and again. She stopped. I have talked about this, I said quietly. A pause. I just wasn't heard. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. Mr. Green opened his briefcase once more. This time, slower, more deliberate. What changes would you like to make? He asked. I looked down at the documents on the table. At Richard's signature. At my name. At everything that had been quietly placed in my hands long before I realized I would need it. Then I looked at Daniel. I'm not removing you, I said. Laura turned sharply. What? She snapped. Daniel blinked. Mom, but I'm changing something, I continued. I shifted my gaze to Laura. You, I said simply, will have no authority over anything that belongs to me. Silence. Heavy. Immediate. That's not fair, she said quickly. I'm his wife, yes, I replied. I held her gaze. Unflinching. You are. A beat. But you are not me. That landed. Because for the first time, she had no argument that could reshape it. I turned back to Mr. Green. I want all decision-making authority to remain solely with me, I said. And after I'm gone, I paused. Everything will be placed in a trust. Daniel's expression shifted again. A trust, he asked. Yes, I said. Structured, protected, and conditional. Laura let out a short laugh. Disbelieving. Conditional, she repeated. What does that even mean? I looked at her. It means, I said calmly, that access is earned. A pause. Not assumed. The room went still again. Because now, the rules had changed. Mr. Green nodded slightly, already understanding. And the conditions? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Respect, I said. Simple. Presence, I added. Another pause. And honesty. Daniel looked at me. Not confused anymore. Not distant. Present. I understand, he said quietly. And I believe that too. Laura didn't speak. Because now, there was nothing left to control. I leaned back slightly in my chair. For years, I said, I gave freely. I glanced at both of them. Because I believe that's what family does. A beat. But family, I continued, doesn't take quietly and call it care. Laura looked away. Daniel didn't. Because now, he couldn't. Mr. Green closed his briefcase gently. I'll prepare the revisions, he said. I nodded. Thank you. And just like that, it was done. No shouting. No slam doors. No dramatic exit. Just a decision. Clear. Final. Unshakable. I stood up, not as someone being pushed out of our own home, but as someone who had just reclaimed it. The house felt different that evening. Not quieter. Not emptier. Just clearer. Daniel left shortly after Mr. Green. He didn't slam the door. Didn't argue. Didn't try to fix anything with rushed words or empty promises. He stopped by the doorway. Turned back toward me. Mom, he said. Just that. No explanation. No defense. No excuse. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the boy he used to be. Not fully. Not completely. But enough. Take your time, I said. He nodded. Then he left. Laura didn't say goodbye. She stood in the living room for a while after he walked out. Still, silent, as if she were waiting for something. For me to change my mind. For the moment to reverse itself. For control to return. It didn't. Finally, she picked up her purse. Walked to the door. Paused. "You're making a mistake," she said without turning around. I didn't respond right away. Because mistakes require doubt. And I didn't have any left. "No," I said quietly. She waited. Just for a second. As if she expected more. There wasn't any. So she left. And just like that, the house was mine again. Not legally. It had always been mine. But something else had returned. Presence. I walked slowly through each room that night. Not checking. Not searching. Remembering. The dining room first. The table still set from the night before. Plates cleared. Chairs slightly out of place. I walked to the head of the table. My chair. Ran my hand along the back of it. Then I pulled it out. And sat down. Not to eat. Not to prove anything. Just to feel it. Belonging. Real belonging. Not something given. Not something negotiated. Something that had always been mine, even when they tried to take it quietly. I stayed there for a while. In the silence. Not empty this time. Peaceful. Later, I went into the kitchen. Turned on the same small lamp above the stove. The one Richard had installed. The light was soft. Warm. Familiar. I made myself a cup of tea. Chamomile again. And as I stood there, I realized something simple. They hadn't taken anything from me. They had only revealed what they were willing to lose. Respect. Trust. A place in my life that I had once given freely. I carried the tea into the living room. Sat down. No television. No noise. Just me. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. I didn't need to chase anyone. Didn't need to explain anything. Didn't need to prove my worth inside a home I had built with my own hands. Because in the end, family isn't defined by who sits at your table. It's defined by who believes. You deserve a seat at all. I took a slow sip of tea, set the cup down, and allowed myself a small, quiet smile. Because they thought I was the woman in the kitchen. They forgot. I was the one who owned the house.